What do I do for mastering? It gets more and more simple every month. There's a track that I'm working on right now that's like a drum and bass track that doesn't have anything on the master, I don't think, and I think it sounds really good, and it's really loud. It sounds great. On this master currently, I've got a linear phase to take off stuff that makes MP3s sound better, so like super high and super low. I have a mid side that makes my low end mono, which is probably the most important thing I have in my master, and then I put a clipper on, and that's it. And then I have this pre-streaming thing that turns things down 0.3 dB because supposedly, algorithms have changed, but supposedly it reduces artifacts from WAVs on the multitude of streaming platforms if you're uploading WAVs. So usually I just keep the MP3 prep and the pre-streaming one on. Sometimes I change the parameters of this slightly. Sometimes I take stuff out on the master, but very rarely because I try and fix stuff in the mix. And then I will change the mid-side EQ sometimes depending on the key of the track. Like this track is C sharp, which is quite an unusual key for me to work in. So I might end up changing the mid-side. It helps stuff hit harder. Like sometimes the sub hits harder. And also, if you have sub with a lot of harmonics, it can be cool to like kind of partition off what you want wide and what you want narrow. But genuinely, like I use less and less all the time. I wouldn't be surprised if in like another year I'm not even using this stuff. Genuinely, like sometimes clippers just sound dog shit, especially if I mix with basically no headroom. I used to mix with loads of headroom. Now if I get headroom, it's kind of an accident. So sometimes a clipper sounds good, sometimes it doesn't. But I've also trained myself to mix as though I'm mixing into a clipper. So like I know where I want my drums to hit and where I want them to not, to make them sound as good as possible through a clipper. So it is all just trial and error. And just because that's the way I do it doesn't mean the way you should do it, you know? It works differently for different people. My style of music is different from other people's, and theirs is different from mine. Which is not a very satisfying answer, but it's truly the way it is. I hated that answer in uni as well. When I got told that, I hated that answer, but it is the truth. That it just doesn't. A, it doesn't matter as long as it sounds good, and B, your master is never going to look the same as other people's unless you're doing nothing on the master. Some people do nothing. Mr. Bill does nothing. Or he does, similar kind of like sound treatment stuff, like an MP3 prep and like a streaming gain reduction thing. But that's like it, just clean master. I think it teaches you to mix better as well, to be honest. There's no real reason why you can't have a mix that sounds as good as everyone else's just within the mix, and not in the the master doesn't fix anything. If you think the master fixes stuff, you're wrong, I would say. It doesn't matter if it goes over 0, because it's all just going to get normalized to 0. Well, unless you're rendering a 32-bit float, which people just don't. If you just render 24-bit or a 16-bit, it's not really going to matter. And if it does matter, you can listen back in the audio and go, oh yeah, that did matter, and then change it. Like, not every mix is the same either. If you have super wide low end, for example, in certain parts of your song, it might sound like dog shit if you don't clip it, maybe. I've had that before sometimes. And then sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes you've got super nice sounding low end if you don't clip it, and then if you clip it, it starts to sound like dog shit. I'm not like a master expert, like guy who knows everything about every plugin. I definitely have a lot to learn, but from my experimentation, it completely depends on the mix. Some mixes I don't bother, some mixes I do.